JTC 100, this is Media Economics Part 5. Last time I was discussing the concentration of media ownership that we've experienced, and there are a variety of organizations dedicated to helping us to understand what this centralization, this concentration means. They do this by visualizing it. One such media analysis project that does a good job capturing the complexity, I think, is called a Recode. And when you look at this at first, it's a little overwhelming, but I'll try to explain what's going on. Keep in mind as I proceed that you don't have to memorize all this minutia for the exam. I just want you to let these facts kind of wash over you, again, so you can see the trend, see the pattern of what's going on. Okay, so let's look at this. These circles each represent a company. Now, the size of the circles is equivalent to the relative market values of these corporations, and you can see some numbers there that are listed. The colors represent what the Recode site calls their main lines of business, what they're really focused on as far as media. The purple circles are companies primarily involved with distribution of media content. I guess we'll call it green circles, kind of a blue-green, but we'll call it green, represent companies focused on content production. And the red companies are involved with streaming of content. Let's isolate on the purple distributors on the left. They're led, and this is according to size, by AT&T. And pay attention to the various names of smaller companies attached to these bigger corporations. So AT&T also owns DirecTV, see down there to the lower left from that circle. And AT&T is trying to purchase Time Warner. Then it's followed by Verizon, which owns Yahoo and AOL, Comcast, which also owns DreamWorks, Universal Studios, NBC, MSNBC, E, and Bravo, and then smaller distributors after that. So you kind of get the idea of the pattern here. The green content producers are led by Comcast, which as mentioned is also a big distributor, so some people are playing more than one role. Disney, and you're probably pretty familiar with their specific empire, but just so you know, they own ABC, as we've discussed, ESPN, Marvel Studios, and Lucasfilm. Then comes Time Warner. In the upper left, you can see what they own. And remember, AT&T is trying to buy Time Warner. So I'm just trying to show the complexity of all this. And that's followed by 21st Century Fox in the top center. And they have various well-known companies and so on. And the red, streamers, including Netflix, followed by Hulu. I was thinking we could more narrowly focus on this image of these companies. But look at how Hulu is partially owned by Disney, 21st Century Fox, Time Warner, and Comcast. So suddenly we realize that Hulu is like a bridge point for these massive corporations that are supposed to be separate. They're supposed to be competitors, right? But what happens when they share a big company like this? So we'll return to that in a moment, but first I want to point out sort of the elephant in the chart. And that is, I haven't even mentioned yet what's represented in the lower right-hand corner, the so-called tech titans, all with higher market capitalization value than all the other mega corporations. So these would be Apple, followed by Google, Amazon, and Facebook. But now here's where things are getting pretty crazy. Earlier I mentioned that the Recode project color-coded these circles based on these companies' main lines of business, but that's the thing. Many of them have been really poaching from each other or are trying. And the Recode site states that now things are up for grabs. Netflix buys stuff from the studios, but it's making its own stuff too, and it's selling it directly to consumers. That's one of the reasons older media companies are trying to compete by consolidating. And new distributors like Verizon and AT&T are getting in on the action. AT&T, for instance, wants to merge with Time Warner, as we discussed. Meanwhile, giant tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Apple that used to be on the sidelines are getting closer and closer to the action. When you push back again and then look at the whole chart, it all becomes a bit more clear. Many of these companies are trying to vertically integrate to control multiple forms of the traditional content production, movies, TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, things like that. But all the massive changes brought about by digital, networked, internet-based communication, they've all thrown this whole in this new dimension of competitive possibilities. So one minute a corporation like Comcast is sort of riding high on the hog at the top of the list. Next minute, Comcast is looking over its shoulder in fear of Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, the tech titans with all this value and all this money and all this power. And it really reminds me of the scene from Jurassic World where the smaller dinosaur is attacked by the bigger dinosaur, but then the bigger dinosaur ultimately becomes a snack for the massive, even bigger Mosasaurus, the animal they always have kind of coming out of the water to grab, the T-Rex or something. Okay, one last look at the Recode chart. It looks like a lot of different companies. It looks like a healthy, sort of thriving marketplace of, capitalism and competition. But number one, many are in the process of being consumed by these bigger fish, or they've already been absorbed. Number two, whatever tentative balances have been achieved are being thrown off by the tech titans who are flexing their muscles and scaring everybody. And number three, because of all the interconnections going on, it kind of feels like one big system, doesn't it? Or at the very least, something like an oligopoly. As I say there, it's a market shared by a small number of producers or sellers. It's not a monopoly, but it's kind of has this oligopoly kind of feel to it. Now, this high technology, sort of highly competitive, yet really highly integrated media situation, it can be very good for us. We all know that, we the consumers, because now we have all these new options for using media anytime, anywhere we want. It's nonlinear, it can be on demand, it can be a little bit pricey, but it could be worse. Advertising is still there, but often not to the extent that it was. But always remember, not much in life is truly free. Sure, you use Google or Facebook and you think that they're making money on the advertising you see, and they are, a lot of money. But the greatest value are the data that you generate every time you sign on and start clicking. They call this the service to profile model, service to profile. It's as if they're saying, we'll give you this amazing service for free, just go have fun out there. But in the process, they're gathering information from you, often sharing this data, selling this data to other companies, all in the interest of lining us up to purchase more services and more stuff. So returning to our slide on the problems with big media, as we're calling it, we can now add, I think, threats to privacy. Today's media economy is growing increasingly dependent on knowing things about you that maybe you feel shouldn't be shared and might even violate your constitutional right to privacy. Something to think about. Okay, so we're going to end Media Economics Part 5 right here.